Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March 14 meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Act of 23 extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31, 2025, this meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling 508-945-4410. Again, 508-945-4410 and enter conference ID 698-918-859 pound sign, 698-918-859 pound sign, or one may join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. Roll call to commence. Joanne Sprague.
Here.
Barb Madison is absent. Tracy Shields.
Here.
Kristen Andres.
Here.
Tommy Doan.
Here.
Andy Young.
Here.
John Papalardo.
Here.
Eric Whiteley.
Here.
Chair is here. All right, we're going to continue our consideration of various warrant-related articles. I'm going to call an audible on our agenda as two of the presenters relative to the airport articles are somewhat time constrained, so I think we will take a moment and start with them rather than the waterfront bond article. So I think we've got Terry online allegedly. Not yet. Tracy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm recusing myself from airport issues, so I will leave the dais.
Very good. Thank you. Huntley, you ready to join us?
Thank you. Huntley Harrison, Airport Commission. I am waiting for Terry because he has a presentation. And I think the presentation obviously involves both the warrant articles. So maybe until he comes on, it would be expedient for you all to pick up one of the others.
Okay, that's fine. And what is your time constraint? Is there a clock? Just so I'm aware.
I've got time. I'll work it out.
Okay.
So just do what you need to do.
All right. Jill, do we have any insight into Terry's availability? He may have been waiting for a while, but because there's a couple things we could knock out, I think, pretty quickly. Once we get into the waterfront bond article, I suspect we'll be at it for a spell.
I think Terry's constraint was he had to leave by 3:30. So I think he's anticipating that the other articles are going to go first. I just texted him. So if you want to start with another article, and then when we see him pop in,
Okay.
then we can pivot over to him.
Okay, why don't we do that? So Carrie, could you take us through, and again, I don't know if Michael McMillan's on board, but the Monterey Regional School operating assessment?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So the Monomoy School budget for FY25 is $10,308,940. And, sorry, just looking for my little sheet over here. So their overall budget for the school for FY25 is $46,511,471, which is an increase of 4.8% over FY 2024. And the assessment for this year for Chatham is an increase of 6.2% or $598,491.
Okay, and again, a total of $10,293,940?
No, $10,308,940. And nothing has changed since their presentation.
Okay, any questions for Carrie with respect to the proposed Monomoy Regional School District operating budget? If not, I'll take a motion to support the appropriation of $10,308,940.
So moved.
Second.
And all those in favor, Joanne?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Chairs in favor, 8-0.
Thank you. And I believe Terry Whalen is now on, so we can proceed with the airport if you'd like.
Terrific, great.
Okay, thank you.
So Huntley, if you got a minute? Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. Terry, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I apologize. I had to come back in on a different link. I
Nope, no
apologize.
worries. Over to you, gentlemen, if we could, please.
I'll let Terry start because
Yeah. I'll start, and again, I apologize for the link issue in the very beginning there. So just, I believe you have copies of the presentation that was provided to the select board on Tuesday evening. And if you'd like, I can run through the presentation or answer questions, however you.
Yeah, why not, if you wouldn't mind, why don't you give us a quick flyby, as it were, of
Sure.
what we're doing?
So what I'm going to do, I'll share my screen quickly. I might flash by a couple of the slides, but just the Scribner's article error is, primarily a housekeeping article in the sense that the action, hopefully you can see the slide here. So again, the action here is to basically reinstitute the word not. So this was something that was inadvertently dropped from the 1950, this was originally approved, in 1958. The bylaw at that point in time was, the hierarchy in the bylaw was different. It was actually section 56. And then in 1997, there was basically a general overhaul of the bylaws, going from sections to chapters. And at that point is when the Scribner's error occurred, back in its transition from section 56 to chapter 100. There was a subsequent change to the general bylaws as well, an administrative format change where it became chapter 100, and that Scribner's error was continued. So basically, all this article is doing is looking to reinstall the word not as it was included in the original bylaw. And basically, it brings this back into compliance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 90.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Questions for Terry or Huntley, as the case may be? If not, I'll take a motion to support the reinsertion of the word not in section 100-4B of the general bylaw.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, Joanne?
Aye.
Tracy's abstained. Kristen?
Aye.
Tommy?
Aye.
Andy? Aye. John?
Aye.
Eric?
Yes.
Chair support, so that's 7-0, Carrie. All right, thank you, Terry. Then airport approach zone map. Oh, there you go.
Right, so I put, so again, I'm skipping a couple of slides for context, but I'll go back through the high points of the graphics. But essentially, a similar type of situation from the actual mechanics of the article are pretty straightforward. With the this article proposes to change a reference from the February 1958 map with a March 2024 map to reconcile the airport approach zones indicated in the general bylaw with those that are in place right now, and what the Airport Commission has been conducting its planning towards in both the following up on airport master plan update items and continuing actions on the obstruction removal project. So there was the 2024 map in your which you probably couldn't see so well in the copies, but essentially this is the revised map that shows the new approach zones. And then, as I was indicating, this is really to reconcile the airport approach zone features with the current conditions, including the airport layout plan and features and the FAA advisory circulars. So the revised approach zone shape also maintains the existing 2-to-1 slope of the 1958 map. So that's how the surface is represented in the air. And this has nothing to do, this proposal has nothing to do with airport approach zones, which are distinct and separate from runway protection zones. And just quickly here, you can see the contrast, rather than showing the old 1958 map, basically the red here indicates the area of the 1958 map. And then the black outline here, which you saw previously, is the proposed 2024 approach area, which is consistent and conformant with the FAA advisory circular on the approach surfaces. And this graphic just shows the difference or area added to the with the resultant new surface area. Sorry.
All right, that's helpful, thank you. Questions for Terry and/or Huntley respecting the revision of the Chapter 100 Airport Approach Zone map? If not, I'll take a motion to support or adopt. Andy, please.
What effect, if any, does this have on the underlying properties?
The new,
I'm
the
sorry,
wider.
Huntley, could you
Yeah.
identify yourself, Huntley, please?
Pardon?
Could you identify yourself?
Oh,
please?
I'm sorry. Huntley Harrison Airport Commission.
Thank you.
When we've been talking with the property owners underneath the new map, that we have not added any property owners between the 58 map and the new map. The yellow zone was just a comparison. So ever since we've been talking with property owners underneath the approach zone, we've been dealing with the new map. And so no property owners will be added. Everyone who's under that area who is affected by the tree removal project has been contacted.
Okay, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Huntley, just for, Terry, just for context, could someone give us a sense of how wide at the apex of those new triangles we're talking about here? Is this a couple 100 feet or is it 20 feet? Is it?
No. At the base, it's 400 feet, 200 feet from the end of the runway, and then perpendicular to the runway, 400 feet, 200 feet on each side from the center line. And then at the far end, the wide end, it's 10,000 feet out, and I believe it's 3,400 wide.
That is correct, yes.
But that's approximately 2 miles off the field?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. All right, further questions or comments? If not, I'll take a motion to support the substitution of the revised Chapter 100 Airport Approach Zone map.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, Joanne?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And the chair's in favor. 7-0. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your
Appreciate
support.
your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, so back to our previously scheduled programming. We're going to head into the reconsideration of the waterfront bond article. And I think Greg Berman is here to speak with us about that.
Greg Berman, Chatham Natural Resources.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, just pulling up the presentation here. So I just have a very few slides in the beginning to talk about the overall budget of the bond and 90 Bridge Street in particular. It seemed like there were probably some questions on that. So I'll kind of lead us through the overall budget and history of the budget over time. But then I also have some town staff and other liaison and committee members who would like the opportunity, if the chair sees fit, just to provide a very brief background on how they've engaged with their constituencies regarding this project over time.
Terrific, thank you.
So starting off, this is kind of the number that's been talked about for many years. This was the original waterfront bond article that listed the $2,090,000. And I just wanted to call this up because on the next slide, I'm going to have that number, and I want you to see where it came from. So we mined a lot of the Select Board and Finance Committee minutes. So that left-hand column indicates the year the minutes came from. The next column is the estimate from those minutes for the cost of the project. And one thing I did want to call out, so that kind of second column with money that talks about property acquisition and feasibility study. So that was approximately $1 million that was spent before the initial bond article. So when we talk about the $2,090,000, we really should add that to it when we're talking about total project cost. So we're already at about $3 million from town funds. And that may have been part of the, increase from 2 million to the number that I mentioned last time. And we will get more into exactly what those numbers are. You can see as we kind of move through time, the initial 2016, we didn't necessarily have a design stage, and really the bulkhead was not even considered at the time. By 2018, we had a rough estimate for about $1 million to include a bulkhead, and really that bulkhead makes the area much more functional, makes parking feasible in a lot of areas, increases the ability and safety of the area. And so at this stage in 2018, we now have a conceptual design. And when I'm talking about these design stages, Ted Keon, our Coastal Resource Director, will get up after me and kind of show you these site plans over time. So we have our conceptual design, and now we have a 10% contingency. The increase has to do with, a better idea of what was proposed at the area. You can see it stayed consistent between 2018 and 2019. By 2020, it has still, relatively consistent, but now we've identified some outside funds. That was one of the SEC grants for engineering. And 2021 is when we get to our first 35% design due to that SEC grant. So now we're able to get a little bit more, granular numbers in there. So by now we've gone from $3 million to about $5 million of town funds. Some of this has to do with the 20% contingency, a little bit better estimate of what that bulkhead's going to cost. And then moving from 21 to 24, that's really where our largest increase has been. But I did want to call out some of the components of the project, like all the way over on the right of that table, the Upwiller Pier, the Flupsies, the dredging. We've gone from a 35% to a 90%, so our numbers should be, much closer to reality when we go out to bid. But that said, we've increased our contingency up instead of going down. And this has to do with the very large increase in costs going forward, projects really across the whole state and country. And, as Ted Keon gets a chance to speak, he can tell you some of his conversations with engineers. It's not just us. When we're looking at some of these discrete project numbers, the bulkhead is pretty much double what it was estimated to be in 21. Very similar with the pier and the Flupsies. Dredging is significantly more than we thought it would be for that particular project. So eventually, Ted Keon will get up here and kind of show the overall footprint of the area and how things have or have not changed over time. But I wanted to kind of go through the numbers, how they've changed over time. I really don't think that, things are getting added that weren't part of the original intent of the project. A lot of what I've heard for this project is it was really unprecedented, the amount of coordination and cooperation between the various boards and stakeholders groups in this town. As, you know, each person has a minute or two to speak, they can mention the various stakeholder groups they represent, but there's been a lot of vetting about these projects, specifically 90 Bridge, which has gone before the Select Board many times over its relatively early lifespan. And
So
then,
Greg, if we could just, I'm sorry, jump back to that. I want to, for the sake of clarity. So to be clear, all the thing that's in the gray, contingency and bulkhead, all feed into the numbers in your town funds column?
either the town funds or outside funds,
Oh,
but yes,
yeah,
those are
fair enough. Thank
components
you.
of the overall project.
Yep, good, thank you.
And then this is, sorry, just go back here. So this, you know, is how it's changed over time, and this is our current estimate. So I know I had presented a number that was about 12.5 million. That was inaccurate. The amount of total town funds estimated is about 9.1 million. Outside funds would be 2.3 million. And, you know, that's starting for now. We're obviously going to be looking for additional outside funding, hopefully additional SEC grants. I think I explained some of the potential options into the future. And these outside funds would, you know, bring down the cost of the bond over time. Hopefully we wouldn't be using it as quickly with these outside funds being used. So I did add a couple of things from the last time you saw this, just kind of calling out that, you know, property acquisition for the $1 million being kind of in the beginning. And then those grayed out areas are money that's already been spent. And then those white areas really still are left to go. So that's our overall cost presented. And I'm not sure if you wanted to talk, you know, about the numbers right now, or we could have Ted show you kind of the site plans over time, and, you know, all of us will certainly be available for questions as you see fit.
So why don't we see what the committee would like to do? Do we want to tuck into the numbers right now? Do we want to get a kind of a more comprehensive overview from Ted of the site plan and the like? Joanne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question. What will it cost you to finish the Bridge Street project?
You mean additional town funds?
Yes.
Additional town funds?
That's what we're looking for right now, right?
Yes. If you're talking about specifically the new bond or overall town funds, I could give.
The new bond, what will it cost the taxpayer to finish the Bridge Street project?
Very good. So out of the new bond, it would be about $4.5 million. But I don't want to indicate that's all the town would be spending. The overall town funds are projected to be $9.1 million. We
Yeah.
hope that would come down with additional grants, but that's where we're at right now.
Okay, so, again, you project to finish 90 Bridge Street, it would cost in town funds $4.5 million.
Just from the waterfront bond that we're putting before the Finance Committee right now. There's additional funding from the Wolf, from the Coastal Resource Dredging Funds, from the existing bond, so there's other sources.
Sure, so there could be ameliorating figures to the 4.5 million that we're projecting now.
Well, it is.
In town funds.
It is projected to be 9.1 million of additional town funds, but 4.5 million of those funds we'd like to come from the new waterfront bond that we are putting before the committee right now.
Are we still talking about Bridge Street
Yes,
project, 90 Bridge Street project?
yes.
The overall cost?
Would you like the overall
You just
cost or
said
the
something
cost
about
to
an
go?
overall cost. I'm just looking for what, when we go to the taxpayer, what can we tell them that they need to pay for the completion of the bridge, this one project?
I'm very sorry. So the overall cost from town funds projected right now is 9.1. We still have another 7.6 left to go.
So see Joanne, bottom right corner, under the town funds, middle column, town funds. We have left to go 7.6 million for total spend of 911,668,
And we're talking about Bridge Street,
90 Bridge Street.
Yes.
90 Bridge Street.
And, I'm sorry, 4.5 would also be coming from that 7.6. I'm sorry if I was not getting your question.
Thank you.
Other questions? Andy, please.
I mean, we can bat around the numbers. I'd also like to know what we get for that, so the site plan.
I think that's sort of the TED presentation. So why don't we, unless other people have sort of imminent questions on funding, why don't we go into the site plan and kind of see what we get, to Andy's point, for the $9+ million.
Ted Keon, Coast Resource Director. So I'm, as Greg indicated, and as we talked at the meeting last week, showing how this project really hasn't changed in concept over the, course of the last few years. As Greg also indicated, the original bond was really, put forward before any conversations with other committees really had occurred, other than the concept that we would like at this location to have a multi-use type facility with an upweller as a component to that. So as, again, Greg indicated, we had a unprecedented group of all the waterway-related committees having joint meetings over the course of close to 2 years, coming up with various concepts. We engaged the firm Stantec at that time to, walk us through, listen to all the different interest groups that were being, presenting different ideas. And ultimately, again, after a number of iterations, this was ultimately the, I don't want to call it the crayon drawing, but the, sketch plan of what the ultimate idea was going to be. And we see the upweller pier with the float system around it. We see the modest extension of the existing small pier that's on the site and the float and gangway off of it. And again, as Greg indicated, really almost from day one, it was recognized that the key component for the site is the bulkhead. You really need the bulkhead for this site to work for anything almost out into the future. So that was the original plan. This is, we changed horses, if you will. At that previous stage, we were in a feasibility contract with the contractor, the engineer. We then went out for proposals to now get into the real design phase, and we liked the proposal that came in from our current engineer instead of Stantec, and this is GEI, the current engineer that's on the project. This is their first kind of detailed design that was completed in '21. At this stage, we were still before the boathouse concept was in play, and this was what we referred to as the purpose-built building that was designed at that stage. But again, I want to highlight, if you look at the site plans, it's essentially the exact same site plan. Nothing has changed as far as what the goals were, what the facility was going to provide for. It just, now that we're into it, let's get into the real design and see how it fits and what's all associated with it. And then here we are as the current plan. It's, again, no change. Essentially, in the layout of the facility, the most obvious, and I think everyone is familiar with, change was the opportunity came to the town about bringing the boathouse that used to be in Stage Harbor back to the site, or back to Chatham. And as I indicated last week, we were within probably inches of the footprint of what the original design was going to be and what the footprint of the boathouse already is. So there was a very, long, lengthy discussion about should this, facility now be, turned in, or should this boathouse become the upwelling facility, and would it work? So we actually had to go back out with our engineering crew, look at the existing boathouse, confirm that it was structurally sound, and would it work essentially as a future upweller, and the conclusion that it would. So the board then endorsed this. They accepted the donation to bring this building back. And I think we indicated again before that it is on the onus of the private owners to bring the boathouse back to Chatham, have it prepared, meaning the floor has to be taken out, and then placed onto what presumably would already have been constructed, which is the footprint and the pier foundation for that building. To give you an idea of what has already occurred in Nantucket, they did, in essence, a very similar conversion, although it is different. They don't have a upwelling nursery facility. They actually have a hatchery. They took the existing boathouse that's on Nantucket Brant Point, and they converted into a full-blown hatchery, which is sort of the stage before the nursery. They're growing from, I'm not even sure exactly all the details of that. I need Renee on that one. But they actually have algae growing inside the facility to feed very, very, very little shellfish. And it's primarily, I understand, for scallops for their local scallop industry. I think that's the primary focus of that facility. But essentially, it is the same concept. They took an existing boathouse, repurposed it into a shellfish facility. And then I think you've seen this rendering before. That is essentially the same type of building. It's a very standard design for the boathouses throughout the nation at that time for the Coast Guard. And that is approximately how it would look. The layout of the piers and deck is similar, or is the same, to what we showed you in the plan view. And that is a 3D rendering of what our internal upwelling facility would presumably look like. We've spent a lot of time with our consultants on the seawater and the upwelling portion of that. That took a lot of time and effort to come up with what it would be appropriate to get the capacity and production that we're looking for in this new facility. So that's what I have as far as, how we got to what we, now are proposing. And again, the takeaway here is because we've all heard the concept of project creep. There's been no creep in expansion. There's been a lot of creep in just the cost overruns. As Greg also indicated, some of the anecdotal, other types of projects. I spoke to our engineer on this project who has a number of projects throughout the region. He gave me an example of a project that he's worked on that in 2016, he had a number for, and I guess it didn't go forward because of whatever reason at that time. That exact same project went out to bid. It was in 2024. So in those 8 years, it went up 160% for exactly the same project. And then I spoke to our owner's representative earlier today, and he gave an example using our own firehouse. He said that when our firehouse was built, the construction costs were $350 a square foot. He just worked on a newer firehouse in some other community that was not as sophisticated, quote, as ours, and the price was $750 a square foot. So again, the takeaway on that is the construction costs across the board have just gone through the roof, COVID, supply chain issues, et cetera. So that really is almost exactly the reason why the costs for this project have, gone up substantially.
Mr. Chair?
So, please, Joanne. Thank you, Ted.
Ted, please humor me for a moment.
Absolutely.
And so you're in agreement that alone, the Bridge Street project, as part of this bill, the cost of that would be the Bridge Street project, everything that we associate with that project. What is the cost of it? Just tell me. I want to look at the figures on the board. Please, humor me.
I want to make sure I picked the right one.
I want to be able to tell the taxpayer, if they're going to vote on something like a complicated project like this, what is it going to cost them?
He will kick me in the shin if I say the wrong number, probably. But I believe, based on this table, to get to a final project with estimates the best we have,
Completed.
7.6 million of additional town funds.
$6 million of additional funds. This is the very beginning of what we're talking about. So we start, when we're talking about the bond bill, we start with this part of it. Number one, Bridge Street project, $7 million.
but some of that would be coming from the existing bond that has not yet been bonded.
And how much of it from the existing bond?
There's existing, I
come on up,
believe,
Greg.
2.3.
Greg, can you give the net amount that's left to fund the project?
From the existing bond?
So I think Ms. Sprague is asking how much it's going to cost the taxpayers in the new bond bill. But with that, I see the explanation has to include what is left from the existing bond bill. So for,
Exactly, thank you.
Yeah, so in what's left in the existing bond bill is the 500K plus 1.8 is 2.3 million. And we're planning to use that for 90 Bridge. So that would be, still to be spent from the existing bond bill. And that-
Okay, let me interrupt you just a minute. So, not talking about anything else, say this was an article all by itself. We have the 90 Bridge Street project, and it's going to cost $7.6 million to finish. And what we are going to do, we could do, is subtract $2.3 million from this ask, because we have that left from the previous bond bill to spend on 90 Bridge Street this time.
That's actually incorporated in the 7.6. is that
No,
we
just
would-
answer this one question. If we have one issue and 90 Bridge Street, you project it would cost us $7 million altogether. But we have $2 million left previously, so we need to ask for 5.3 million?
No.
Okay, explain.
So there's 2.3 million left in the existing bond that is planned to be part of the 7.6 million, but out of the new proposed bond that we're talking about right now, it wouldn't be the full amount of that bond used just for 90 Bridge. It would be $4.5 million from the new bond that would be part of that 7.6 million that still needs to be spent.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I think to try to clarify this a little bit, I always fall back on sources and uses, right? Our uses are as of now, which of course is not a static figure. It's anticipated that our current uses are $7.6 million, correct? To finish the project?
Yes.
Okay. The uses are 2.3 from the 17 bond bill, 4.5 anticipated from this bond bill, the extent it goes forward, incremental woof figures, $1 million or whatever it was, right?
Yes.
So again, just trying to keep it clear, we're talking about another 7.6 to finish it. It's coming from a variety of sources, including the prospective bond bill, the former bond bill from 17, the Waterways User Fund, and other cats and dogs,
Hopefully grants, but yes.
grants.
Yeah, I mean, the grants that we are going to pursue would lower all those numbers as far as town commitment, but we didn't want to taint the numbers until we actually had those grant approval.
Conservative. Carrie, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to add that whatever we don't use for borrowing, we would rescind. So it would come off.
Okay, so is that clear? Yes. Okay, Eric, please.
And not to further confuse that part of it, but the outside funds number shown there, does that also include the CPC number, or is that not included at all in these numbers?
It does. It's within the outside funds. And that may have been part of the confusion from last time, is I had something called other funds that was just everything other than the bond. So I tried to remove that ambiguity this time and just have town money and grant money. And I know CPC is, kind of gray that way, but that's where we put it.
And then just while we're rumbling around in the numbers and the complications of that, the way I read this chart, and just to be clear to everyone, we're talking town funds and outside funds, funds spent and funds we haven't spent. We're talking about $11.4 million for this project. It's not 9.1, is my understanding. We're talking about 11.4 million all in for where we're going with this.
Correct? Can we get a verbal reply to that, please?
Correct, so including
thank
what the
you.
town spends and outside funds, it is the 11.4 approximately.
Thank you.
And we do have Renee available virtually, if she could say a few words.
Sure, yeah, please, by all means. Renee, can you hear us?
Hello, and I apologize for not being there in person. And thank you for letting us all speak to you today. Can everybody hear me well?
Yep, we're good, thank you.
All right, good. I'm sitting in my truck. Okay. Well, first, I have to say that I am remiss that I didn't take the opportunity prior to the 11th hour to give this committee a more in-depth presentation on the town's propagation program, and specifically the history, mission, and the current conditions of the existing upweller. It's old, it's tired, and it's losing its desired capability. But for this meeting, I think I'd like to talk more. It's more important to talk about our constituents. I know this is a multi-use proposed project, but I'm going to talk about our shellfish program and the constituents that we serve. The reports of the demise of our commercial shellfish fishery, has been greatly exaggerated to somewhat quote Mark Twain. Chatham still boasts the most lucrative wild-caught shellfish fishery in the state of Massachusetts. Those are 2002 numbers. I haven't received them for 2003 yet, but we've been #1 in the state for the last 5 years. Preliminary numbers from the Division of Marine Fisheries value our total commercial landings at $3.5 million. And for specifically the quahog, it's 1.7 million. And those are wholesale values. Those are the numbers that are going directly into the pockets of our local shell fishermen. If we use multiplier effects, which many industries do, the industry standard is 3.1. That's a $10.5 million industry. And for quahogs alone, a 5.3. And I want to emphasize that commercial shell fishermen must be domiciled residents. And so they are year-round, they contribute to our economy year-round, and they're part of their taxpayer base. So I just wanted to qualify that. We also sold 2,819 recreational permits last year, with 2,000 of those being sold directly to residents. Those are, again, our local taxpayers. It's a popular activity. And if you look at any given Sunday over at the Causeway, you're going to see 100 or more people there. And those are the folks that this program supports. So I wish I had more time to talk about the details of our upweller and our comparative mission with the upweller that you've heard about over at Herring River. But I just think it's important to know that these folks are part of our residents, and there's a great contribution to this program to those folks. So if you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Renee. So questions for any of our presenters or otherwise? Andy, please.
Stuart, before you get away, how many moorings do we have in town?
Mooring's about 2,400.
Okay. And so all those people, they go get their boat and they come into a town landing like, Andrew Harding's Lane. Oh, wait a minute, you can't use that anymore. How about Hallway Street?
No,
Oh, wait, you can't do that either.
unless you're a good swimmer.
Maybe you could come into Battlefield Landing if you're one of the first 10 cars, but that's about it. I mean, essentially, our waterfront has been under assault for quite some time, between sea level rise, erosion, and a booming population of commercial and recreational shell fishermen and boat owners. 90 Bridge, in my mind, is one of the few opportunities we have to increase the usability of a very nice little spot on the river. Harvey Bloomer used to love it. Right, but this is our opportunity to love it, and I'm not real happy about the escalation in the prices, but I don't see anything in here or in the presentation that indicates that this wasn't a subject of some kind of public process. before it got to this stage. Now, the ultimate process will be a town meeting, but, you know, we have an awful lot of boaters that I think, you know, would love to have something like this available, and also commercial fishermen. So, I mean, you know, we are going to always have pressure on our waterfront, and this is an opportunity to do something I think that's quite unique. Thank you.
Stuart, please.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. It is one of those few opportunities, and I don't want to sound draconian, but maybe the last opportunity in Stage Harbor to accommodate any additional or enhanced access to the water for the public. You know, Renee has spoke very well on the upweller. I just wanted to touch on the other aspects of this, of 90 Bridge Street. If you review the town meeting warrant article in 2014 and the South Coastal Harbor Management Plan and the committee discussions, including the Waterways Advisory Committee, the Shellfish Committee, South Coastal Harbor Plan Committee, and the Antlidias Cove Committee, which is not easy to get all four people to agree, or four groups to agree on this, and they did over a number of meetings. It is a multi-use facility. That's the proposal. So everyone has some sort of buy-in on this facility. It is not strictly for one user group or another. Like our other town landings, like Riders Cove, Barn Hill, Fish Pier, are all used by commercial, recreational, and the general public. And I think that that's an important aspect that we not lose sight of. That was the original intent, and that should continue. We don't want to get to the end of this, have, and we've seen this before, funding issues and fund one aspect of this project and not another one. We are in desperate need of commercial fishing offloading facilities. We basically have one in Stage Harbor. We used to have two. One is now a yacht club, and the other one the town bought and is a single dory, single boat offloading facility at next to our office. The ones in front of our office, the commercial fishermen use, but it's more used for recreational, but they both use it, just like the Fish Pier. More used for the commercial industry, but because of those losses at Andrew Harding's and Holloway Street, we have a large contingent of recreational boaters that use it as well. So I just wanted to emphasize that the Antlidias Cove Committee had a great deal of discussion about this, as well as the other committees, and that component of a multi-use facility for the shellfish folks, for the general public, for viewing, for commercial fishing offloading at the bulkhead that really is the fundamental discussion here today, and the concrete float proposed closest to Stage Harbor Marine that you saw on one of the slides, is all important components. We don't want to lose one or two, because then those folks that supported this will be loud and disappointed. So, you know, we have almost 500 boats in Stage Harbor, and you folks are very familiar with the facilities we have. It's in front of our office and the trap dock.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank
Eric,
you.
please.
Thanks, Stuart. I think my comments on where we are is I completely understand and agree that the upweller is a critical component of our local shellfish industry and needs to be supported. All the points that Andy and Stu made about the waterfront access and the need for that and the opportunity that's here for that are critical. So I agree with all of that. What concerns me a little bit is that we have the process that we're going through here. It seems that from 2016 till now, the project has been much better defined. We have better estimates. We have a better understanding of the costs. And I guess from my perspective, is there a reason that it needs to be in this omnibus type arrangement with the bonding? It's an important enough article that isn't it something that that the town should be able to get a single bite at and decide that they want to do this project at this level of cost? Even amongst this group, who I think has studied it very closely and seen it year after year, the numbers are confusing. There's last year's, this year's, town funds, out-of-town funds. So bringing it in the package that it is now with the 11.2 or whatever it is, I think adds additional confusion and in some ways could create a situation, as maybe how I'm feeling and how I voted the last time this was in front of us, that it's a little too loose to do it that way. If it came, I know personally, if it came with the full package, with the value and the definition of it and knowing the importance of it, I would probably support it. I just am concerned with the way, not the project or that it's embedded with these other projects, it's that it's been loose and there's really no true definition to it, and I don't think we're really doing the right thing for the taxpayers by not giving them the opportunity to say yes or no directly to the project.
Other observations? Kristen, please.
So I believe I was on the South Coastal Harbor Plan Committee when we were discussing this as this project was developed, and everything that Ted said, this was looked at as multi-purpose use was what everybody wanted. This was the best part about this property and this project. And to Andy's point, yes, we are losing our water access points. We are a seaside community. This particular project obviously is more than just a feel-good project. We are supporting our local economy. We're providing public access for boating and fishing and swimming, access to water for everybody. And I think it's just a super important project, together with the historic aspect of it and saving that building. The whole question of the bond, probably Jill or somebody else can really speak to the value of having a waterfront bond and why we did it the first time around. But I think that we have a lot of projects that need some work, and what would be the pitfall if this was just a single article? Thanks.
John, please.
Yeah, I guess picking up on Eric and Kristen's comments, I mean, the flip side is true too. I mean, having this in the bond bill could sink the bond bill from some people's perspective. Maybe, I've heard from a bunch of people that it's a lot of money for some upwellers. And as we've heard today, and you can see, it's a multi-use property or project. I guess my question would be, why is it not separated out? Why is it nestled in a bond bill or a bond article that I think goes out 5 years, authorizes borrowing for 5 years? Is that right?
The bond cycle is 5 years, but the actual borrowing duration could be up to 20 years to pay off the projects.
And so what the decision to not let this be a standalone item was just one of efficiency, ease? The project would span multiple years?
Well, I think the original idea for the bond back in 2017 was almost like a waterfront strategic plan, and understanding that permitting for these projects can take a number of years. I'm sorry. I'm not getting choked up over it, just allergies. It could take a number of years, and then, there could be, with the bond and the original intent, and moving forward to keep it in that same format is, while we're working on 90 Bridge Street, there's other projects that could begin the design, understanding that it is a 5-year bond, and we're only going to borrow once we get to the point in the design that would move us to construction. But I think it would allow the natural resources team the ability to start planning and permitting other priority projects, and that was our original intent. And with some bond remaining in the current bond, and with the new bond to get us to complete this and a few other projects that we weren't able to do back in 2016 when we were costing it out. I think this provides the most flexibility and probably the greater way to actually accomplish what we want to do in our strategic plan for waterfront resources.
Well, thank you for that. It makes sense. Certainly we need to maintain and hopefully improve capacity for folks to access the water, both commercial and recreational. Big supporter of improving or modernizing our upwelling facility. It's amazing Renee's had it going as long as she's had. I don't know if folks have had an opportunity to go down and visit it. I know they do an open house once a year anyways. If I could ask Renee a question, if she's still online.
I'm here, John.
Hi, Renee. How much more capacity will this new facility as spec'd out provide to the community?
We estimated it at 1/3 more than our current capacity. We didn't really want to go any further than that, John, because we want to make sure that the monies we receive from the revolving fund are able to, our expenditures are funded by the revolving fund. So we didn't want to make outrageous, I'm sure I could fit more because the entire system is going to have a much higher velocity as far as water. So we're going to have a lot greater growth. The project proposes to have the flupsies around. Again, that's a secondary grow-out system. So the system itself, I'm sure, would be able to raise far more, but we want to have realistic expectations with the monies that we have.
So the capacity is improved, increased with the potential for expansion?
Capacity is increased and the growth capacity is most definitely increased because our main objective is to get those seed as big as possible. And if you know our current facility, we have a 2-tiered system. So those bottom tanks are getting leftover waters from that top system. And this system, each tank will have its own water coming into the system. So it's going to have maximum growth potential. And those were calculations far beyond my capability. They were done by Rachel, our previous propagation specialist, and Dale Levitt, he's an expert, and I'm sure anybody in the field knows Dale's name.
Thank you. Well, so I was in the negative a week or two ago. I can't remember when we took the vote. Obviously, I voted to reconsider it. I think the board, the staff and the community's done a really good job explaining to this panel and to me today that something like this should go forward to the community for consideration on town meeting floor. I'm not happy with the growth of the budget for this specific project. I guess I'm sort of comfortable with the bonding process, but I think there's been a lot of good points made today about all the different groups, stakeholder groups that have plugged into this process. The select board has plugged into the process along the way. And we'll see how the town meeting takes it. It's a big pill to swallow, but I'll vote to support the bill.
Thank you, John. Renee, we've got a couple more questions, but have you got a ballpark number of how many animals we anticipate this facility being able to grow in the course of a season?
Well, we currently purchase between 2.5 and 3 million. So we're, I don't know if I can do the math that quickly in my truck, about 4 to 5 million cohogs annually. Ben is standing right next to me, so he did the quick math.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Joanne, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand and believe fully in the value of the waterfront to Chatham. That's Chatham. That's why we are who we are. On the other hand, we are dealing with other people's money when we talk about all of this. It's not just, well, gee, that sounds good to me. I'll vote for it. I don't feel that way. I can't vote to recommend to the taxpayers that they borrow a little more than $11 million for fiscal year '25 for waterfront projects. If I could, I would recommend to the taxpayers that they appropriate $6 million to fund their highest priority projects, and then ask the administration to return next fiscal year to ask for the funding needed to complete their next priorities. And I keep emphasizing priorities because when we're dealing with other people's money, I feel we need to prioritize them, the projects, so that from our estimation and what it's going to cost on the tax rate to be able to recommend to our taxpayers. So I'm not going to vote for this article, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Joanne. Andy, please.
I'm not sure who to ask this of. Maybe it's you, Ted, or you. I think, previously I recall you saying that the existence of previous town authorization, i.e. the previous bond, helped to attract some of the grant money because the grantors knew that there was town backing for the project and that they could match up funds very easily. Other than 90 Bridge in the proposed article, are there other projects in there that you believe would merit grant funds?
Absolutely. The Riders Cove project will be another targeted Seaport Economic Council grant. I hope and expect that they would support that. Joanne, I understand your prioritization issue. Probably everything on that list, except perhaps the Barnhill bulkhead, is a high priority type project. This project, 90 Bridge, obviously we're already in process, and further delays would delay the process and obviously probably increase costs. The fish pier, we are right at the goal line to finish what was already part of the original design, which was to add the walkway along the southern side, so we'd want to keep that going. Riders Cove, we started that project a few years ago. We have a very good design. We're already near the final kind of finishing touches as far as getting ready for the permitting process. We paused that while these other projects were, underway, like the fish pier and the trap dock. That's another priority because that facility, the bulkhead is deteriorating. I mean, there are holes in it. We have holes above on the parking lot side because material is wicking out of the bulkhead. So that is something that needs to be done. So, and Little Mill Pond, that pier, while it appears to be fairly sound, if you go bang on the piles, you realize that many of them are hollow. So prioritization is sort of already established in the projects that we've presented. The bond allows us, as was already indicated, all right, we're ready for construction here, but let's not wait another year for some of these permitting issues, because permitting for these projects when you're going into construction is a year by itself. So if we wait to start the permitting, then we have a whole year potentially of additional time just for the permits before we then go back in for construction. So the bond has been extremely helpful for getting all the projects that we've already done in a seamless fashion. So I think the bond approach was a godsend when we were, recognized that the town needed to invest in its waterfront infrastructure.
May I respond,
Please.
Mr. Chair? Yes, I understand your priorities, but at the same time, I'm thinking of the people who are going to pay for this. And I'm thinking that over the past 11 years, they have had an average increase on their value of their property of about 5%. So therefore, every year, that's not going to go down. The valuations keep going up. And so we have to look at not only the waterfront bill, but the whole warrant and decide how much do we think that we want to ask the taxpayers to pay for the whole budget. So I would agree with, again, paying for the most important project, certainly $6 million from my point of view, and that's just to throw out there what I could look at as asking the taxpayer to pay this year And that no matter what we say of importance, and this is highly important, everything on our warrant is important to somebody. And this is important, but I still think we have to consider seriously of what it's going to cost the people who live here, who live through having the value of their properties inflated 5% every year, and the fact that we're just recovering from a high inflation year, and we're going into, as the Federal Reserve says, a less inflated year, maybe 3%, not 5 to 6, 7%, as we have known in the past 12 months or so. So thank you for your explanation. I do appreciate, I don't argue with the value of what you're saying or the importance of what you're saying, but I have to connect that with what, just like any other family or any other business would have to do, prioritize what's most important to us to buy first.
Eric, please.
I think just tagging onto that and what I had said before, again, I do support the concepts of all this. It's the funding mechanisms, and I think one thing that we don't know and may or may not matter at this point, but in 2016, the estimate was about $3 million. Now we're at 11.4. So it's not just a 100% increase, it's a dramatic increase. And the original funding for the previous waterfront bonding bill had, I don't know what number, it doesn't really matter. It was probably a $5 million in there for the cost of that. And the town supported that for all the reasons that we all are saying here, that these are important. But would they have supported it then if it was $11 million? And the creep is real, and it happens. So they may have, and that's what I'm saying. I think creating the buckets that make it much easier for the town to move these forward. I understand that piece of it may serve the ultimately getting to the end, but I don't think we know that the town would have supported it if it was at that level of cost. So that's my concern about the funding mechanism that we're working with here.
Thank you. John, please. Oh, sorry. Greg, reply to that?
It is related to it.
Yeah, go for it.
So I did just want to, add with what Ted was talking about. It's not just the flexibility it provides staff, but there is actual cost savings to being able to use the bond. If we identify issues that come up during a project, for example, the fuel system at Fish Pier or some of the steel columns, they can be addressed along the way without, stopping the entire project. And one of the things that we can see pretty clearly is the prices never went down. They're only going up. We have contingencies built in that our engineers have given us, but contingencies are being expanded, and not that we would want it to overrun, but if it were to overrun slightly, that might stop the project until we could go back to town meeting to request more. If that happened, the overall project price would probably be going up just due to the additional time span. So it's the flexibility is very important, but I do feel that this mechanism can actually save the town money. Oh, and just before, potentially a vote is taken, I did want to mention that, waterfront space is a premium. Obviously, the availability and the expense, I think multi-use is key. And we do have 2 chairs present. If you would like comments from them, we have the Shellfish Advisory Committee chair. We may have the Historical Commission chair online. I'm not positive, but that's one, aspect about the project you may not have heard completely. But they're available if you would like.
Thank you for that, and I think we probably would like to hear from them, but I know John's got something he'd like to say, and perhaps others. Or I believe. Okay, well, let me invite anybody in the audience who may wish to raise their hand and approach the podium. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Davis. I'm chair of the Shellfish Advisory Committee, and one of the aspects of almost going last is almost everything has been said. I do have 3 observations, however. One, very quickly, our propagation program and shellfishing generally are ingrained in this community. They're part of the fabric of Chatham and bolster the whole notion of our being a fishing community. And the cornerstone of all of that is our upweller. If we don't have an upweller, much of that goes away. Secondly, the elephant in the room, actually, it's obviously in the room, it's not hidden any longer, is the cost. And it's interesting, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal just yesterday. The headline reads, "We still don't believe how much things cost." I think we're all reeling from that in our individual lives and as we sit here together. So that's a factor. And add to that, the economists are talking about this issue as being something called sticky inflation, meaning this isn't going to go away. It's our new reality. The third observation is I would distinguish between price and value. Nobody's happy about the price of this thing. It is different than the value, and it's difficult for us to individually to place a value on these projects on behalf of the taxpayers. Only they in May will be able to determine whether these projects constitute value for them in their lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Mr. Messina. I'm referred to Mr. Messina, whose hand is up, please, online.
Hi. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and I really appreciate the effort that you folks are putting into consideration of this. I guess I'm speaking as chair of the Historical Commission, and personally, and I know Stu Smith and a number of other people in the town for the last 25, maybe close to 30 years, have been trying to find a way to save the U.S. Card House. And lightning struck when we had the opportunity to potentially integrate it to what's being proposed.
Frank, let me interrupt for a moment. Your audio's sketchy at best. Could I possibly get you to call in to the meeting?
Will do. I'll leave it and come back.
Let me give you. Yeah, have you got the number and the ID? Let's hope. Frank, you there now? You there, Frank? Can you hear me now? Frank, can you get us? You may be muted, Frank. Oh, try that again, please.
Hello?
Yep, that's better.
Hi. Thank you very much, and I apologize for that. You folks are really doing a phenomenal job here in analyzing what needs to be done, and I'm wearing my Historical Commission chair hat, and as I was saying, was trying to stay before, for the 25 or 30 years, we've been working hard to try to find a place to save and bring the Coast Guard building back to Chatham. And so I know it's not your primary consideration in terms of what you're doing, but please don't forget, in addition to everything else that you're doing here, we have an opportunity, a rare opportunity, to bring this historic structure back to Stage Harbor. And thank you very much for your time and your deliberations and consideration of this. I believe the public, multiple town meetings have supported the Coast Guard Boathouse, and I think they would continue to do that. And I don't think it's a detriment to the overall waterfront structure. I think it probably passed unanimously when we voted for that structure, and I think it will. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Very good, thank you. John, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, we've been focusing on the Bridge Street project, but that's not what's going before the town. It's a component of what's going before the town. $11.4 million. Carrie's given us the cost of that debt service based on a variety of examples of $1.5 million home, $1 million or $1.2 million, $1 million. And I mean that, to Joanne's point, that's what people are going to look at that, right? They're going to look at this. They're going to look at all the other projects and asks that are before them and apply it to their own circumstance. And, you know, as I said before, this project's been on the drawing board for a long time, and our experience with projects that take a long time to get a full thumbs up is that every time we look at it, it goes up 50%, 100%, 200%. That's why you know, as hard as I said, as hard as it is to vote yes on the full package, I can't imagine missing the opportunity now and then having to revisit it in 2 years, what the number's gonna be. And I can't imagine Chatham without a functioning upwell or a thriving shellfish opportunity, commercial and recreational, or access to the water. So, I guess one last question, if I might. So this goes forward, this gets approved by the town. My understanding has been that the town managers will then borrow as we go. You're not gonna actually borrow $11.4 million the next day.
Correct, that's right. So it's not gonna, I'm just showing you how much it would be once we get to the total amount.
Right.
But, yeah, so if we only expend $1 million, then we're only gonna borrow for $1 million. And no, not for the bond. That would be 2026.
And maybe it can't be done, maybe it can, but any guess as to how much we would borrow the first 2 years, based on the list of projects that are part of the bond bill,
Here comes Greg.
bond article?
So it's our hope that we're able to finish the 90 Bridge project within fiscal year 25 and 26. And we also hope to have the Fish Pier Walkway completed during that time. Now, we are hoping that the cost of the Fish Pier Walkway goes down, but, you know, ballpark, that first fiscal year could be up to $5 million, something like that.
There's usually a lag between when the project is substantially complete to when we actually do the borrowing.
Yeah, I guess the reason I went through that question and answer was just, these numbers that are presented aren't gonna hit everybody year one, right? People benefit from knowing, like, this is the worst-case scenario. If we came out of the gate, borrowed all the money right away, and just started adding it to the tax roll.
That's correct, John. And also, again, if they get all the grants and the subsidies that they're talking about, we won't be using all of the 11.4. We can rescind that. So we might only need, 6 or 7.
Well, to that point, I mean, the state right now is going through its economic development planning process, and, I personally and my organization work really hard to make sure that fishing was in the plan. It wasn't in the last plan. Not even the word fish was in the last plan. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we've also been working really hard to try to beef up the Seaport Economic Council's appropriations, I guess you would say, because we're not the only community going through what we're going through. And, up till now, usually the big cities and the big ports get a lot of the funding, but, Chatham has done a really good job drawing on the Seaport Economic Council, so.
All right, I think we've got Andy, Tracy, then Eric. I'm mindful of the clock. I'm mindful of the fact that our report is due to the warrant next week. We still have to get on the transfer station, which is not an inconsequential project. So let me start with Andy, please.
Maybe just a brief technical question. Could the article be revised, amended, so it only presents the 90 Bridge project?
Anybody?
I can't speak for the select board, but they've already placed it and voted favorably on it. We have one meeting left before the warrant closes. I don't know if that can be decided today or tomorrow for placement on the select board agenda for next week. But again, in proposing the bond, that it was a 5-year bond and it lasted 7 years. And if we take just the 90 Bridge Street project out and it fails, then I have all the other projects. And again, it's just presenting the facts that we've had earmarked as priority will have to potentially come up. So this year, we thought for financial planning was a good year. The only other substantial project, as you'll hear, is the transfer station, but we didn't have a wastewater borrowing authorization for this year and no other capital building project. And so as we looked forward a few years, this seemed like the right time and where we are with the projects.
And don't misunderstand me, I meant to amend the article so that only 90 Bridge was put forward. And all the other elements were taken away.
Well, if I understand Greg's analysis, if it's another 6 million or so to finish the project, the other projects wouldn't be able to start permitting until we actually had an authorization to.
I understand. I'm just trying to round up support for actually getting 90 Bridge finished this year.
Understand.
All right, that's just a thought.
Yep. I mean, it would come notionally at the expense of all forward progress on all the other projects.
Oh, yes, yeah, and that needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Tracy, please.
I guess just a point of clarification, just if I'm asked. The bond is the 11.4.
11.7, I think, right?
Right.
11.4, the original one was 11.75.
But if somebody asks, grand total, what does the 90 Bridge Street project cost from start to finish?
Well,
That's 11 as well?
as of now, it's 11,430,066, according
Okay.
to.
I just wanted to be sure I wasn't confusing my 11s.
But I would not hold on to that number as a static figure. Eric?
Real quickly, sorry, to make the point, so there's the 11.7, the previous bond, we haven't borrowed against the last balance of that. So we're talking about in this year, taking that money, and then in addition to that, 6 million. So we really are executing the bonding for close to that full 11 million. It's coming from two different places, but.
I just wanted to clarify, though, that the existing bond has the 2.3 million that would be used, and then all of 90 Bridge from the proposed new bond would be 4.5.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? Joanne, please.
Just to review with the administration again, what you sent us was for this increase on the tax bill, for the waterfront bond bill, for a house of the value of $1 million and the valuation of the town at 10.9 million, which I understand is maybe 11.3 million, and the average value of a home now is 1.2 million, but again, in fiscal year 26, the increase on that average taxpayer would be $98.80. Now that's one increase. That doesn't increase any of the rest of the tax increases that come about because of the other articles, whether it's operations or school or whatever, on the warrant.
Yes, that's correct. This is if we borrow for the full amount, 11.4, it would have, like you said, if it was $1 million home, it would have a $98 increase if we borrowed for 11.4 million in that.
I just noticed that sometimes you use 1.2 million for the average value of the home, and sometimes you use 11.4 billion valuation for the town versus 10.9 billion for the valuation of the town.
I don't know what she's talking about.
I understand what you're talking about. So in the past, we've shown what the median home value is. Carrie in her forecast is actually implementing what the principal and interest rate would be to each home at a different value.
Okay.
She's showing if someone out there has a home that's 500,000, that they could see what the impact is. This isn't just the one thing that you've seen in
And I think the impact is very important to consider for our taxpayers, because that's just one article versus everything else. Thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions? I guess my observation, having listened to this and having had the benefit of a conversation earlier this week with some of the town staff, it's clear that I think Andy and Kristen kind of nailed it, right? This is as Mark Twain said, they're not making land anymore. And we're certainly running out of it in this town at some level for public access. So I wholly support the idea of the project. I think what troubles me about the project is what Eric and others have referred to, which is the fact that this thing was put to the taxpayers in 2017 at somewhere between $2 and $4 million, or 16, 17, at somewhere between $2 and $4 million. Interesting, I went back to look at the 2017 report, annual report of the town of Chatham, and there was an observation by Natural Resources that the select board had directed this project was too complicated and too expensive at $4 million and wanted it downsized. Obviously, that never took place. I just wonder if, from a process perspective, there isn't a way to give the taxpayers, and I guess technically, yes, at town meeting they could be, but somewhere along the line between 2017 and 2024, a second bite at the apple or a second look, comprehensive look at the facts. That this is a project that's gone from, pick your baseline, let's call it 4, to nearly 3 times that, $11.4 million. And I think it's fair to say we're probably not done yet. So I'm going to support this. I support what the broader initiative will stand to do for the waterfront in this town. I get the idea of having an available pocket of money, but I can't believe that we're dealing with an optimized process around how this is all going down from the taxpayer's perspective. And it's not going to happen for this warrant article, I get it, but I would really encourage the political leadership and the administrative leadership of this town to think about whether this process is highest and best, and if there's not some way that the taxpayer could benefit on a going forward basis from a revision to this, one and done process that leads us ending up, in this instance with a $4 million project that's going to turn out to be a $12 million project, perhaps at best. So that's where I land. Other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to support Article XX, the waterfront bond article, in the amount of $11.4 million.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Joanne.
No.
Thank you, Barbara, who has joined us.
No.
Tracy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
No.
Thank you. Chair votes yes. So that's 6-3. Same vote, different way, exactly. All right, thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody who participated in the conversation. We appreciate it very much. A good exposition.
Thank you.
And with that, Carrie or Rob, I think we're on to the transfer station.
Good afternoon. Rob Faley, Director of Public Works. Just find, Okay, so I'll give you a brief update of kind of where we've been and where we're planning on going. I know we've been here before, so I just want to give you a brief update. So just to recap, spring 2023 annual town meeting approved $4.82 million for the construction of Phase 1, Priority 2, which is the recycling area, in that big orange, big orange circle, and Phase 2, garage staff building, Priority 1, which is the red circled area. We also had $215,000 remaining from our design contract, so that left a total of $5.035 million for construction phase work. So Phase 2, it was estimated at 2.1 million. Bids came in over the winter, came in at 3.852 million. The contract was awarded to J.J. Cardosi. We also realized there's an additional $295,000 we needed out of that original appropriation, and that's for construction administration by the designer, the owner's project manager, material testing, a bunch of ancillary things, but it totals $295,000. So that brings the total cost for Phase 2 up to $4.14 million. So we look at the current status. Recycling area, priority 2. Again, it was estimated at 2.72 million. Bids were opened over the winter. They came in at 3.17 million. We did not award that contract. It's been long believed that the staff of the transfer station was the higher priority. They had some OSHA issues that we wanted to correct. So we only had money for one of those phases to be awarded. So we tabled Phase 1, and we're here with kind of a new design. So this is the project as we bid it. We look for efficiencies in the next iteration. During final design, you see in the green circled area, we did some exploratory test pits. We found a large stump dump in that area. Some of the depth of that stump area deposition area is 15 feet deep. So all of that material would have to be removed and suitable material brought back in for us to be able to build on top of that. That was a very large expense. So what this is doing by maybe redesigning this, we are allowed to leave a lot of that material in place and work around the stump dump. So this is our revised layout. So in the red line here is kind of the approximate area of the stump dump. It gave us an opportunity to do some refinements. We conducted interviews with the transfer station staff, which was very insightful. I'm not sure how in-depth that was before, but we wanted to figure out what was working for them, what they would like to see. They live there, 6-7 days a week, and they're the number one priority in my mind, aside from the customer's experience. So again, we minimize I'll do a side-by-side comparison here too, so you don't have to remember what the previous version looked like and the new version. But so minimize impacts of the stump dump, improve some traffic flow and some congestion issues, and integrate portion of Phase 3. So you may ask yourself, what's Phase 3? Well, I'll tell you. So Phase 3 was, so the Finance Committee may not have been abreast of all of the different phases of the transfer station construction. It was a very long arcing project to kind of rehabilitate the entire transfer station. So Phase 3 was the tipping building, the big blue building where commercial haulers come, where residents drop their bagged municipal solid waste and then move on to the recycling facility from there. So this is proposed from, I think, 2020. There were some small additions added on to the tipping floor building. It had compactors and conveyors in there, and that was basically meant just for commercial haulers to use that facility. It wasn't residential trash was being brought down to the recycling area. Estimate in 2020 was 1.22 million just for this, and that was about a 30% design. So, cost escalation, I'm sure nowadays it would probably be in the $3 to $4 million range if we look at, all things equal. So here is the side-by-side comparison I mentioned. So what we were able to do, here is was proposed swap shop. Currently it's down here at the bottom. There's a lot of traffic congestion. So we took the swap shop from here, we moved it out of the stump dump area, we moved it up into this area, and I think with all the backing movements that we would have, there's a lot of elderly residents that use that. I think this would be a much safer alternative with the angled parking. And it also gets people kind of on the way in or out, so they're not in the middle of everything. This was the proposed difficult to manage area. It would have to be concrete pads and paved area, so again, the stumps would have to be removed below that area. We propose here to leave it where it is. In the original design, that area where difficult to manage waste was going to be used for employee parking. So we moved the employee parking, just a slight impact in the stump dump area. Excavation wouldn't have to be that deep, but we'd be able to park employee staff there, and then we would remove that whole impact from the difficult to manage waste area. Originally, we had 10 compactors and 3 containers in this area. We've lessened that, so now there are 6 compactors and 4 containers. And the beauty of this is, so I mentioned before the municipal solid waste was going to be deposited here. There are only 3 compactors proposed. In our busy summer months, we have as many as 9 windows open on the tipping floor building where residents deposit trash, and we still have lines at times. So if we had 3 municipal solid waste dumpsters there or compactors there would probably be a lot more traffic congestion. So what we were able to do was really look at this. We were able to lessen the height of some of the retaining walls with this area. This is a mirror image. So one side has glass, plastic, mixed paper, aluminum, that sort of thing. The other side has the exact same layout. So if residents come in here and they see this area is full, they can just drive around and use this area. In this layout, you'd have to drop your trash, drop your, whatever it is, recycling, come over here, bring your glass, and bring your mixed paper. So it wasn't as efficient of a layout. And with the new layout, it also allows us in the winter months when things are less hectic, we can close an entire side off, and then we'd still have another side open for all residents. Excuse me, I'm just going through my notes, make sure I covered everything. So also as a part of this, we talked about phase 3. So phase 3 is the tipping floor. What we'd like to do is rehab that floor. I don't know if anybody's been there to see that. Rebar is basically exposed. It's popped through the concrete. It poses a tripping hazard, a hazard for our tires, for our loader. And it also, what it does is contains all this liquid, all this bacteria growth, and it's really a tremendous source of odor. It's really more of a health concern for our employees that are working in there. And they do go in and clean it out. They power wash it, once or twice a month in the summertime. But it's still, there's so many crevices and everything that bacteria, that stench really just gets permeated in there. So what we'd like to do is, we've heard what the committee's concerns were. What if commercial haulers are no longer using Chatham Transfer Station? Well, regardless, we would still do it for the residents. So it's kind of independent of what happens with commercial haulers in the future, whether they stay or not, but we really need to rehab that floor for the residents so it has a better experience. We do get complaints of odors from some of the neighbors at times, and I think rehabbing that floor would go a long way to reduce some of those complaints. And here's the nuts and bolts of it all. So hopefully this is a little bit easier to explain. I revised it from the select board meeting based on some of the questions that I received. So the original funding approved again in 2023 annual town meeting was 4.8 million. We had some remaining from design. Total we have available was 5.03. Phase 2 bid award was 3.8. That left 1.1 million. Then administrative costs left about 887,000. New estimate for phase 1 is 3.1 million. And I know that doesn't seem like a huge cost savings because the previous estimate was 3.17. However, knowing what we know now and where the costs are coming in at, I know the designer got a little bit more conservative in their estimating, and we just want to try to have a better product. If we add the tipping floor rehab, that's another 305,000. But that would eliminate any future phase 3 work. So we'd basically include phase 1 and phase 3 together. And I know there's a concern over scope creep, but it's really an opportunity where we can put the transfer station work on it once, and put it to bed, and we won't have to touch it again for quite a few years. We did also add a 10% contingency. I mean, there are some smaller contingencies built into the estimate, but this is something where we won't have to come back. If bids come in a little bit higher than we expected, this will cover our costs, so we don't have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money. So the overall left is basically 2.9 million. That's the request to complete the transfer station and get it up and running and modernized.
Thank you, Rob. So just for context, Carrie or Jill, did action of the select board, are they posting this to the warrant for 2.9, or where do we stand?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Kristen, I think you had your hand up.
So I guess in my mind then, to be clear about, so when the function of people coming in to get rid of their trash, they're still gonna go to the blue building then?
They would still go to
Under
the blue
this
building.
scenario?
That's one of the traffic patterns that we were trying to eliminate with the original design. But with the difficult to manage waste, that would still be on that side. The traffic flow at the recycling area would be vastly improved. So it's it's more of a compromise. We've also clarified the gatehouse and the scale traffic a little bit more too. So I think it's going to be, much more user-friendly feature.
Yep, thank you.
Other questions? Joanne, please.
Just notes that the approval of this bond would cost a $1 million single-family home $38 on their tax bill. And you add that to the $98 for the year, FY '26, that the waterfront bond bill is adding. So you've got, but just between these two articles, if they're accepted, $146 on a tax bill, and that doesn't include what I'm talking about is the 5% annual increase in the house evaluations over the last 11 years. So I'm just saying I cannot recommend to taxpayers that they borrow the full $3 million for the completion of all these improvements to the transfer station. And I use the transfer station about 3 or 4 times a week. It's important to me and important to the town. I do think the most important part of this is fulfilling our OSHA requirements for our employees there. So even though I would not recommend $3 million, if I could, I would recommend we appropriate, more appropriately, $1 million to fund the administration's highest priority of this, which I assume is to complete our OSHA obligations, and then return the next fiscal year to request fundings for the next projects on their priority list.
So Rob, just to be clear though, I think my understanding was that we've awarded Phase 2 Priority 1, which is the OSHA improvements. Is that
That's correct. There are some other OSHA improvements that are site-driven, not just for the building.
The building
But the primary
structure.
The majority of them were in the building.
Okay. All right, thank you. Other questions or comments? Kristen, please.
I want to make it a clarification again about what's going on the tax rate, because I think, unless I misunderstood what Joanne said, I think what I heard her say is that the transfer station's going, so if you have $1 million home, the transfer station's going to add $30.36 per year. But what I also heard you say is that you lump that in with the waterfront bond as being, we're not borrowing the waterfront bond all in 1 year. That's been said multiple times. So I just really want to clarify that, because I think that is just kind of not true to say that that waterfront bond is going to be added to our tax bill just as the $38.36 is the first year around.
I think, excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please, Joanne.
I think I quoted from the printout that we got that the impact on the tax bill for fiscal year 26 would be $98. That's the printout that you sent us. I have it right here.
That's if we borrow all, for the full 11.4, yep,
Right,
yep.
Day one.
That's the worst case scenario.
yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Kristen, you good?
Yeah, no, that's my understanding, but also to follow up with that, it's very unlikely that we're going to borrow 11.4 in year 2026.
On top of 2.9 for the transfer station in 1 year. Yeah, good point. Rob, in terms of remediation of the current tipping floor, is that just a kind of a clean and an etch and a new pour on top of it, or cap it? kind of
Yeah,
thing?
it would be kind of jackhammering that to get under that mat of rebar, placing new rebar, and then
Okay.
pouring more concrete on top. Yes.
Okay, so a little more durable. All right, further questions? So Carrie, we're looking for what, 2.9 on this one?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Barbara? I can hear you. I can't see you.
Oh, good. I have a question for Rob. So Rob, the fact that we've already awarded the contract for phase 2 means that we have no shot at all now of going back and saying, gee, we only had half this amount of money to spend. What can you do for what we had to spend? Is that true?
That's correct. And, you know, there would be financial consequences if we were to cancel an existing contract with a contractor.
So going forward, in terms of what we're planning to award now for phase 1 and phase 3, do we have any hope that we're going to be able to stay within that budget? I mean, can we say to the people that are considering taking on the contract that that is all we're going to spend?
So,
And tell them to give us hope for what they can do for what we are willing to spend?
sure. And, you know, the cost escalation was not as great for phase 1, the recycling area. It only came in maybe $400,000 over engineer's estimate. So it's a much more conservative increase in cost. So I strongly believe with the contingency, we'll be able to get it done under the amount that we're requesting.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Barbara. Other comments or questions? If not, I'll take a motion to support Article 17, capital project debt exclusion for the transfer station, $2.9 million.
So moved.
Second. Anybody?
Second.
Thank you. Joanne?
No,
Barbara?
No.
Tracy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Chairs in favor, so 7-2 on that. Carrie?
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. So we are on to a CPA general bylaw amendment.
So, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
The, Debbie, oh, you are here. Oh, okay. Never mind, sorry.
No, I saw Gary back there and I figured that must be why he's here, so I took a shot. Gary, sorry you had to wait so long, but
No problem. So I'm Gary Tennyson, Chairman of the CPC, and I'm filling in for Debbie Aikman, who wasn't able to make it. What the CPC is proposing is a update in the bylaw, that the section of the bylaw that indicates how our membership are appointed. And do you have the changes in front of you?
we should. I do.
Okay, good.
A lot of nodding heads.
All right, so one of these changes is just simply resulting from the change that occurred when the Affordable Housing Committee changed its name to the Chatham Community Housing Partnership. So those names are stated in the bylaw, and so we would like to update that to indicate that the Chatham Community Housing Partnership will be designated one of our members. That change also needs to be made then in the final the final sentence of that section, so replacing the committee with partnership. We also noticed that the Housing Authority, which also has designates a member, wasn't listed in that sentence, so we're also asking authority. The other update or change that we're proposing is to make it more emphatic that these committees and partnerships and authorities have a responsibility to appoint a member to our committee. And so the act itself, the state act, the Community Preservation Act, says that these committees shall appoint a member. And so we're suggesting that the word will be shifted to shall. And we're also suggesting that the option where the wording is, or for whatever reason that committee fails to recommend an individual to the committee, be eliminated. What that option was, that if the committee failed to recommend, the select board could select someone else to serve on the committee, on the CPC committee. The fact is, we really need members from these other particularly regulatory committees. The discussion that you had about the boathouse is a good example. The CPC is recommending funding for the historic rehabilitation of that boathouse once it gets here. We needed to know that the Historical Commission felt that that was an historical asset. We also needed to know that the Conservation Commission had approved that development on the waterfront. So we need to have those members there, and we just want to make it as emphatic as we can that these other committees and authorities and commissions have a responsibility to designate a member. So that's the reason for that particular change.
Okay, questions for Gary with respect to the proposed changes to the Community Preservation Act language in the bylaws? Andy, please.
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, that the material that we received today indicates that the proposed amendments, so there's more than one, were then forwarded to town council.
There were amendments, and the one that I gave you in the attachment today is the final one.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, all right. And then secondarily, there was also town council note that the amendments will require a charter amendment as well.
Right, that's not with this one.
Okay,
So this is
right.
the final, yeah.
All right.
So they could avoid all that.
That clears that up, thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah, I might add that when this was presented to the select board, the town council was participating in that discussion and had no objection.
Okay. Further comments, questions? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to support changes to the Community Preservation Act language. Barbara?
Mr. Chairman? Yes, thank you. If I could just have a quick question for Gary. So Gary, each committee that has to appoint someone to the CPC, they have to appoint someone from their own committees? Like if the Historical Committee, for example, didn't have anybody on their committee who wanted to be that appointee, could the Historical Committee then appoint someone who was not on the committee, or must they appoint someone who is on their committee?
I'm not sure what the legal answer to that is. We would certainly want somebody from the committee who participated in their discussion of the project that was being proposed to us. So I think we would certainly, I think, go back to them and say, isn't it possible to send somebody that actually serves on your committee and can represent your committee in our discussion?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that will probably happen. I was just worried, what if you can't find somebody? Does that system just get lost?
Well, presumably, if you couldn't find somebody, wouldn't it default over to the select board will choose somebody, according to the proposed language?
Wasn't that what they're trying to take
That's
out?
what we're trying to change. In other words, we'd want to present that as an option to these committees, that if they don't follow up with their responsibility, that somehow somebody else is going to pick up that responsibility.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, further comments or questions? If not, I'll take a motion to support the changes.
So moved?
Second.
Thank you, thank you. Joanne?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Boards and chairs in favor, 9-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, appreciate your patience. And I think we have the proposed tree protection bylaw.
Yes, we have Dee Dee Holt here from Chatham Friends of Trees.
Welcome, Dee Dee. Thank you
Mr.
for your
Chairman.
patience.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Kristen?
I just want to, for clarity and for transparency, I just want to say I used to serve on the Friends of Trees Board, but I no longer do, so I don't believe I have a conflict.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
She's very missed. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon and happy Pi Day. Big important day.
That's right. Tracy?
I'm Dee Dee Holt, here representing Friends of Trees to present a proposed tree protection bylaw that will be on the warrant in May. We have received support for this bylaw from the Select Board, the Planning Board, the Park and Rec Commission, and Conservation Commission, and we will ask that you vote your support as well. Let me begin by telling you what this bylaw does not do. The tree protection bylaw does not apply to trees growing on private property. What it does do is offer protection for trees growing on town-owned public lands. More than 100 years ago, Massachusetts passed Mass General Law, Chapter 87, the Shade Tree Law. The law was intended to protect shade trees, basically street trees, in communities across the Commonwealth. It's antiquated, vague, and addresses only shade tree removal. It is virtually silent about replacing trees that are lost. The purpose of this tree protection bylaw is to clarify, amplify, and fill in the gaps in Chapter 87. It provides the tree warden with clear guidance with respect to process and gives the tree warden explicit authority to require tree replacement. It also extends certain protections to town-owned trees in open spaces such as parks and encourages preservation of the town's woodlands. Again, it does not apply to private property. In addition to enhancing and clarifying the provisions of the shade tree law, there are 4 additional provisions to note. First, it establishes a revolving tree fund for the purposes of receiving fines for violations and other payments required by Chapter 87, as well as any other monies the town may appropriate to it. Such funds will be used for replacement and care of Chatham's trees. Second, as I stated earlier, 87 does not address replacement of removed trees. It leaves such a decision up to the tree warden, and so allows for decisions that may appear arbitrary or inconsistent. The bylaw specifies how and what is expected for tree replacement. Number 3, the bylaw extends protections to trees on town-owned public spaces such as parks. If the town wants to remove a tree in a park, they must notify the tree warden, who will then require and advise on the replacement trees and species. Likewise, if a tree comes down during a storm or succumbs to disease, the tree warden requires that the town replace it. Without this provision to replant lost trees, Chatham may permanently lose trees in our parks and along our streets and all the benefits they provide us. Finally, the bylaw encourages the town to take care of woodland trees and to preserve as much wild space as possible during town infrastructure development, such as water treatment plants and pump stations. It requires the site plan to include areas of the woodland to be disturbed and the number of large trees to be taken. It encourages contractors to minimize disturbance and to include in the contract a replanting plan, the goal of which is to rewild as much of the disturbed area as possible. Without this provision, Chatham risks losing our forested lands bit by bit, and as our woodlands are home to many wildlife species, we risk unnecessarily segmenting or destroying their habitat. Fortunately, the town has been sensitive to this in the past. This bylaw simply makes that more explicit. Rob Faley, Tom Barr, and Dan Tobin, who was tree warden for 30 years and currently are interim tree warden, have reviewed this bylaw. They all supportive, and Dan stated that the bylaw will give the tree warden solid guidelines and it will better explain the provisions of the shade tree law to lay people. In conclusion, the Commonwealth encourages communities to enact tree protection bylaws. Both Orleans and Provincetown have enacted bylaws. Harwich and Wellfleet are considering this. Many communities over the bridge also have the bylaw. As a Tree City USA, Chatham's tree provision bylaw suggests, strengthens that commitment. And as the fourth of the Select Board's goals and objectives for 2025, that acknowledges the importance of protecting Chatham's natural resources. Clearly, when we do as much as we can to preserve and protect Chatham's trees along our streets, in our parks, and in our woodlands, we benefit from their many values. And also, we preserve those wonderful and invaluable resources for future generations. And not to be forgotten, we preserve preserve the habitat of our wild neighbors that need this for their very existence. Before I take your questions, I just want to make a quick note about Friends of Trees. We are a 501c3 founded in 1978. With the generous support of Chatham citizens, we have planted many hundreds of trees on our streetscapes, parks, and other public places. We've worked very closely with the tree warden to identify locations of trees. And an example is in the tornadic winds we had in July 2018, 4 large trees came down in Chase Park, and it was Friends of Trees who planted 4 new trees in the park. We have a good relationship with Rob Faley and Tom Barr, who will be our new tree warden. We've begun meeting monthly with Tom to address projects, and our Friends of Trees looks forward to planting many more trees in town for all of us to enjoy. With that, I will take your questions.
Okay. Questions for Dee Holt regarding the proposed tree protection bylaw?
Mr. Chair,
Joanne, please.
I move approval of creating a tree protection bylaw for the town.
Thank you. Let me see if there are any other questions. Tracy, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify, so it does say that when removal of woodland trees is necessary for development of town infrastructure benefiting the citizens of Chatham, the terms of this bylaw do not apply except for the following. I think this is great, but my concern is how it might affect, say, a parcel of woodland land that the town designates for the development of affordable or attainable housing.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. That actually came up in another meeting. Those are only recommendations. I mean, personally, I would like to see affordable housing go on already developed land. But given that that may not be the case, the bylaw doesn't say that has to happen. It recommends that these things that the consideration be given to just protect as many trees as possible. And from what I've seen on the proposed, I guess, drafts we've already received from some of the possible developments of the affordable housing areas we're looking at, they have included, space for trees and open space. And so there seems to be already a sensitivity to that.
Okay, further questions regarding the proposed tree protection bylaw? We have a motion. Is there a second then?
Second.
Thank you, Tommy. Support for the proposed tree protection bylaw, Joanne?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Chairs in favor, 9-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your patience. All right. So I think that about does it for today. We've got, Carrie, you're out on Tuesday, I think. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Jill, are you going to be joining us? And we still have a couple more articles we need to try to get through. And I think a couple that the select board's not hearing until next Tuesday night.
Yes, Mr. Chair, so I'll be here on Tuesday. There's a couple of placeholder articles that we're asking the select board to place that they're not providing a recommendation, and I wouldn't expect the FinCom to be ready for a recommendation. It's just to have that as for timing to get it on the posted warrant. But I think that the other articles that are not placeholders, I can certainly report on them.
Okay, so maybe we can put our heads together, Carrie, you and I, or Jill, you and I, on just exactly what we're going to be looking for on Tuesday, and then any kind of last-minute articles for Thursday. We will have a discussion as well on Tuesday about the draft of our report, which was circulated to anybody. If you have any immediate comments, typos, better phrasing, we forgot this idea, don't forget that idea, et cetera, send them over. And again, if there's enough of a consensus around, us wanting to talk about X, Y, or Z, then we'll consider it on our Tuesday meeting. But anything you can shovel in sooner rather than later would be most helpful, given where we are in the calendar on that. And again, don't reply all, so there's no deliberation, but just sort of flick a quick note to me on, as a couple of you have, around typos and wording, wordsmithing. Anything further, Carrie or Jill, on your side? Nope.
No.
Okay, if not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second?
Joanne, in favor?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And the chair's in favor, 9-0. Thank you guys very much.